Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor Greg Dooley and the pundit Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark, and we are proudly presented by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with peak confidence. Visit Nick's website at peakwm.com to learn more. And today on the Professor and the Pundit, we're going to talk about our favorite things for Christmas of 2024. Are you ready for some football? Are you ready for some basketball? And a whole lot more involving Michigan and Alabama and the portal and coaching changes. Greg, there's a lot to go through.
There's a lot to go through, and I'm still going through final grading of my semester, Steve. Remember, I am actually the professor. And what I've been doing is looking at my final projects and who is showing up as an expert or third party in my students' videos. None other than Steve Clark, the pundit, to add context, color, expertise in several of the students' videos, Steve. Well done, man.
Thank you. And I got to tell you, your students are great. I mean, they come in well prepared, well organized. They do follow-up emails. I think these guys are ready for the next level when they actually get into the job market coming up in a couple of years or so.
For context, for each of my classes, I had the choice, like, what do I want to do for their final project? And they all do some form of video. Like in my history of college athletics, it's a history documentary, right? But along those lines, I really pushed them to, for a small part of their grade, to reach out to somebody like Steve Clark or an expert to add expertise, to add perspective, to share ideas. So, A, they meet somebody, but also I think it makes their project better. And that's why Steve is on that rarefied list of many people who I refer students to. So I appreciate you doing it, man. And the students have a lot of fun with it, I think. And I may post some of the best ones across all of my classes, either on invictors.com for those documentaries or on LinkedIn if you want to check them out. So, and by the way, if you're a person who thinks you might have an area of expertise in sports, athletics, history, or something like that, and you want to be on that list, just let me know. But it's been a lot of fun, Steve. But we do have some current football history to talk about, namely the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's starting this weekend, so there's not much of a layoff. We don't have a situation where teams are like taking 4 weeks off and it feels like a completely brand new team and all the momentum has been lost. They just recently played, so here we are just after a couple of weeks. This is all starting again. And it's funny to me. It's not funny. It's actually discouraging. Is to hear the mountains of people over the years. It's every year. They're upset with the current system. And the current system is broken and needs to start all over again. And here's what we think would be the ideal situation. And it takes college football a lot of time, but eventually they work their way over to that system. But it only takes about 3 to 5 days before they say, this system is broken again. This is what's wrong.
All your fellow pundits out there.
You got what you wanted. You got inclusion. All the conference champions are involved. You've got a group of 5 representative that's involved. You got at-large teams from multiple conferences that say, just didn't win that conference championship game, but now they have another chance. And everybody hates it because people don't like where people are seated. They still get up in arms about the last team getting in, and it proves again, it doesn't matter whether you're 5th instead of 4th, 9th instead of 8th, or 73rd instead of 72nd. Everyone gets themselves in a tizzy, and I'm sick of it. It almost seems fake that people are outraged over the new system. Once again, you got everything that you wanted.
Yeah, well, it's not as much of a conversation point anymore, but the whole question on SMU over Alabama, there's always going to be the bubble team, just like in the tournament where we're talking about the bubble team, but in reality, rarely does it matter for the tournament, right? SMU, Alabama, I could see it either way, and I don't have a big bone to pick with picking SMU over Alabama, but it really was where the choice was. And I don't know if you saw Herb Street, look, I'm not doing this again, where he kind of advocated for Florida State being out last time, man. And clearly, and he said death threats, right? Death threats. And he got so harassed in Dublin. One of our podcast episodes was heckling Kirk Herbstreit. It was because he was getting worked over in Dublin. Yeah. But I'm fine with. I understand what they did. We don't have to rehash it here. But I don't think you can penalize SMU unless they completely lay down in that conference championship, which they did not. I understand where they're coming from, but obviously Bama fans were in a tizzy over that.
Well, Alabama maybe shouldn't have lost to 2 6-6 teams. I mean, really, time is only going to tell whether the right team is in. And you don't know. I mean, if the SMU team shows up the way they played the first half against Clemson in the playoff game, well, it was the wrong decision. If Alabama plays Michigan the way they played Oklahoma, clearly the right decision.
Yeah.
So Alabama was just too inconsistent all year. SMU certainly didn't have the schedule. They had to make a tough choice. They made it. Let's just live with it. Again, probably not going to win the national championship. Although I do have to say the playoffs seem really diluted. I wish this was like a scenario and it never will be able to change it. But you just kind of want to see how the college football season is going and then determine what kind of playoff we should have this year. You could say that Oregon is clear and above, just beat everybody else. It's the only undefeated team left. We don't need a playoff. Just give Oregon the championship like we used to do in the 70s and 80s.
Put them in the championship game and let the other teams play for it.
Put them against one of the other top teams that they haven't played already and battle for it. But this is also a year that you wouldn't want a 14 playoff. This is a year that you would want to have a 12-team playoff because it's so diluted. And quite frankly, I think a lot of these teams, I think more than half of these teams actually can win the national championship.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody turning back the time and go, this is what the debate would have been for the 4 teams and how it would have looked. But, it probably, it would have been ugly. So as far as the playoff sits today, other people are picking at it. The one thing I would consider, I definitely think that a certain number of conference champions should get an automatic bid, okay? I definitely think that, and 5 seems like a reasonable number. I might consider seeding 1 to 12 and having the top 4. Forget about Notre Dame. They've laid their bed. They were part of that decision not to accept a bye. We've talked about it on this podcast. Outside of that, give the top 4 seeds as ranked by the committee the first 4 bids. But whatever, we have some good matchups in there, Steve. We got Indiana in the in-state battle against Notre Dame, which hopefully will be exciting. And then we got Tennessee at Ohio State, which I don't know if you heard Herb Street, speaking of Herb Street, saying, look, hey, Ohio State, you sure you want to play at home when the fans are booing you on a 3rd down because they're not happy? That was harsh. So he went silent on the opinions, but boy, did he turn the screws in Ohio State. And, of course, now we know his son is going to be joining the Michigan football team here next year.
Chase Herbstreit did not get the offer that he wanted from Ryan Day. Chase Herbstreit wanted to be a Buckeye. He had said it for a long time, never got the offer. Sherrone Moore saw something in him and got that. And, look, I mean, he's an unrated player.
Welcome to the family.
But so was Davis Warren.
Yeah, welcome to the family.
Yeah, exactly. So, boy, that was something else. But the game for me in this home round is Ohio State is hosting Tennessee. I'm really looking forward to that one. And the rest of it, I am surprised that some of these northern cities are hosting. I really kind of figured that somehow, some way, the SEC would weasel their way to get all of the home games coming up in the following years because of their, again, strength of schedule and class and reputation. And they obliterated one another, much like the Pac-12 conference has done over the last 5 years. If you remember, the Pac-12 championship eliminated itself from college football playoff consideration by the end of September because they kept knocking each other off. And therefore, they were not going to get in. But in a 12-team playoff, this is what the SEC was doing. But it wasn't 1 loss. It wasn't 2 losses. It was 3 losses that were putting them out of play. That's what Alabama had.
As a subtext, I'm curious to see what we'll find out what happens this year. But of course, you have last year. You have a non-SEC national champion, if you remember, Steve. I think you do. Vividly, I imagine. But if we have another one and then another one, well, this is all in the era of where NIL and paying players is out in the open. Maybe it's a little harder to win when you can't do it behind the scenes. That's going to be one of the things that we see here, that trend would be broken. A lot has to happen, and the SEC has some very good teams, including Texas now in the playoff in Georgia. We'll see what happens.
Just remember, Greg, that if the SEC does not win the national championship 2 and 3 years in a row in the South, the system will be broken.
Right.
Because the SEC has to win the national championship. There's something wrong with the system.
The system, yeah.
Remember that,
I
everybody.
mean, this is, if you had to ask, I would say an SEC team is not going to win it, possibly Texas. We'll see. Steve, would you consider reseeding after round one, which some people have talked about? The reason I don't like that is for the fans. Like, I'd like to know if we're playing a first-round game and our next game is at the Rose Bowl, like Ohio State and Tennessee is. I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that as a fan. I'd like to do the flight game and the hotel game and make some temporary plans like so many of us did for Houston. I think for the fans, it's the best. To me, it's the best outcome to know where you're going and not have to pivot on whatever the stretch between the first and second round games is, 10 days or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that's the right thing to do for fans. Now, I could be argued off this, but let me know what you think.
What I think is, when you say the fans want this, the fans that are involved in the playoff want this. The fans that are not involved in the playoff would probably like to see a reseeding, and to make sure that you're getting really good matchups all the way through. However, I'll go beyond what the local fan base of these traveling teams have to go through. You're looking at like a week to 10 days to change things on the fly, which is, I guess, what an NFL road team and their fan base would have to go through. But I think the bowl sites, the Rose Bowl wants to know who their two teams are and not have it changed up on them with 10 days to go in their big game.
Yeah.
I just don't think they would want that.
Yeah.
And make that exist. So, no, the seeding is the way it's going to be. And if somebody's got an easier path, like Penn State, to the semifinals,
right,
so be it. But if I know Penn State, and I think I do, Penn State will be competitive and put a good showing, a good Cub Scout showing, and lose. Because that's what Penn State does.
Yeah.
Under James Franklin, under the past 10 years.
I'm expecting them to lose, just as you described it. I don't know who's not. I'm also expecting Ohio State to stumble. I don't know if you can get over the mental block of what happened at the end of the regular season. Maybe they will. They've got clearly a tough path going through Tennessee, then Oregon, then potentially Texas, then somebody like Georgia. We'll see.
The one thing about Ohio State that we've learned again from Michigan, and I say this and I will continue to say this, Michigan is inside Ohio State's head. But there's something about their offense that probably doesn't work as well with the particular quarterback they have in Will Howard that may not work as a strong passing game in these colder environments. Kirk Herbstreit might be onto something that maybe you want to play this game at a neutral site or maybe in Tennessee where it's a little bit warmer and you can execute both sides of your offense a little bit better. But needless to say, the game is in Columbus. There are no excuses for this $20 million roster that Urban Meyer declared as the best roster of the 21st century. So I'm just looking forward to seeing what Ohio State can do, but they can be one of those teams that I think could win it all.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't want Ohio State to win the national championship. I'm not worried about it. I'm not losing sleep over it. It's because we just won the national championship. We have them. We beat them 4 years in a row. What are they supposed to say? I'm not worried about recruiting. We're doing fine. Just not worried about that. But then, Steve, we haven't even got to our bowl game yet. And there are these other bowl games.
What is this called? This is called the ReliaQuest Bowl?
Yeah, that's our sponsor, ReliaQuest. Let's go out to, I suppose it's ReliaQuest.com. I don't know.
What does ReliaQuest do? Do you know?
It feels like insurance, doesn't it? We should have a contest.
By the time the bowl game happens,
vacation insurance.
When we watch this game, we'll know exactly what they do. Because their ads will be on. We'll know exactly what they do on December 31st. This is formerly the Outback Bowl. I want to redub this game as the Opt-Out Bowl.
Yes.
Because Michigan players are opting out of this one. I'm not upset about it. I don't think anybody else should be upset about it either. The ones that are opting out are people who need to get to the transfer portal and get out. But they also are the guys that could be first-round draft picks that don't want to be the next Jake Butt in the Orange Bowl in 2016. So there is no Will Johnson. There is no Mason Graham. There is no Colson Loveland. There is no Donovan Edwards. The point spread is 10.5. It should be 20. Maybe we'll feel better about 20-point underdogs because Michigan won the last time they were a 20-point underdog.
Look, I'm definitely interested in this game. I'm not really interested in the other ones. I was interested in some of the New Year's Six Bowls before, but it seems like those have just been lifted up and dropped into the playoff, right? That's what we've got.
Right.
But I wasn't really interested in these games the last 3 years. We had our own business going on.
Oh, no, it seemed very elementary compared to a 14 playoff run. We're on our own level of tea here.
Well, it's like the NIT. The other ones are the NIT.
Yes.
So, but I'm definitely interested in this game. I mean, look, Steve, if Bryce Underwood is participating in some level in the spring game this year, and the weather's decent, we're going to have 50,000 plus people at the Big House watching us play ourselves, okay? So a spring scrimmage against Alabama, I'm watching, all right? I'm watching to see the players, how they do, players we haven't seen play, looking for those surprises that are going to be factors next year on our team. But don't expect me to fly down to Tampa to watch this. Steve, where's Nick? I think I'm still paying for the Rose Bowl. Definitely the Rose Bowl, maybe a little bit of Houston.
Well, I understand, though, why people may ask you, though, because you did show up to the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl 10 years ago when Shea Patterson did not quarterback.
No, I did. And I will say, Steve, we stayed at that sweet resort that we stayed at the Fiesta Bowl, which was awesome, with that awesome hospitality.
That is one of the top all-time places I have been at.
Yeah, you get a little like bungalow in this little desert type environment. Yeah,
it's like Fred Flintstone. Everything was just a bunch of boulders, and you lived inside one.
Yeah, boulders and cacti. So it was fun, but we'll watch it. But so now is Alabama? I would expect their team to be opting out as well.
They're not, as of the latest reports. They're not. Jalen Milroe wants to play. He's been asked point blank of whether he's going to play. He says he's going to play, so you have to take him for his word. Only heard of the number 2 running back from Alabama not participating so far. So we'll probably learn more down the pipe. But the portal opened up over a week ago. So, and if you want to jump ship, you want to do it early.
Yeah, and of course, those players, there are instances of players who end up coming back. You enter the portal and you come back. I don't expect a lot of that to happen this time, Steve, and we'll talk about some of those guys who are leaving. But there is a new coach in Schembecker Hall, Steve. What do we know about Chip Lindsey? Because I feel like people were hoping for a sexier name here for our coordinator, because I don't really know who this guy is. And, there was talk of Brian Greasy. Is it going to be Greasy? Is he going to bring the clans back together? That Lloyd era. He's one of the stalwarts of that small community here of Lloyd people. But no, Chip Lindsey. What do we know about Lindsey?
What Michigan fans want is a name that they're familiar with. And something that they heard about watching Fox's Big Noon or ESPN College Game Day. They want to hear those names that are talked about every other episode. Oh, Chip Lindsey is a guy who spent most of his career, at least half of his career, in the high school ranks, earned his time, got into the college football ranks. What he's known for is being at Auburn about 5 or 6 years ago when even Al Borges was an offensive analyst at Auburn. He was a quarterback's coach there. He had Jarrett Stidham there. He recruited Bo Nix to Auburn, and then after that was the head coach at Troy. Then he was the offensive coordinator for Mack Brown at North Carolina, and his protege, much like there was J.J. McCarthy, his was Drake May, who went higher than J.J. McCarthy in the most recent NFL draft. I think he was number 3, and the reputation is that he loves to innovate in not only the passing game, but in the run game, has had good results at North Carolina. Players that he has coached have nothing but great things to say about him as a person and as a coach. So Michigan fans should be excited about this pick. Yet I understand when people go, I've never even heard of this guy before. And how many playoff wins does North Carolina have? 0. How many playoff appearances does North Carolina have? 0. I think they were just kind of expecting a little bit bigger name on the marquee.
They were. So the real question is, was Bryce Underwood on the hiring committee? Was he one of the heads in the Zoom call? Like where we need to talk about this. Just so was he part of the final decision? And I assume not directly, but there was sign off, Steve. There was sign off because I think his role is also quarterback's coach. So this is going to be his guy. The other thing, I definitely there has to be like a mesh of say, values and beliefs with Sharon Moore, if this is really going to work. Like, they have to be aligned on how they see the world. Having Sharon just having left this position right before taking over. So I think they need to see eye to eye, not necessarily agree on everything, but kind of see eye to eye. But really the big thing you're wondering is when and where and how was Bryce Underwood involved in the decision? Because it was somewhere, Steve.
It has to be
somewhere.
And I had to be careful about this, talking on the Michigan Insider with Sam about, what do you think of Chip Lindsey? And it said, well, it really doesn't matter what I think. It's how does Bryce Underwood and Sharon Moore think? And at the same time, it's like common sense says they had some input into this, although there's no direct reporting that there is, so you have to be careful about how you say it. But I think it's only common sense that if you're going to invest $10 million in a particular quarterback, that might have something to say whether you like the new OC coming in.
Oh, definitely.
Because you don't want your $10 million quarterback leaving after the spring because he hates the guy coming in.
Yeah, and it wasn't just here. It was. This is what we're thinking about with Kirk Campbell, and that seems to be made. That decision seemed to be made, a little bit ago, if you believe on what you hear. So here we go. This is the new world, Steve. Transfer portal. We got some names coming in, some rumors that were kind of unfounded.
So, talking about the quarterback situation itself, I think one of the biggest questions in the offseason is what route do you go with Bryce Underwood? Dylan Raiola was last year's number one quarterback in the class of 2024, and Nebraska decided, and Matt Rule decided, we're playing him right away as a freshman. Jaden Davis, a top 10 ranked quarterback in the class of 24 coming to Michigan, did not want to play in his freshman season. You understand the arguments, right? If you're not ready or you feel that you're going to do better when you're better prepared instead of jumping in head first into such a position, again, with Michigan's offensive line being the way it was, it could damage you. There's this argument in the NFL about starting rookies right away.
Yeah.
So you can apply that here in college. And I'm not saying one way is right and the other way is wrong, but a decision has to be made on that. So one of the decisions that could be made is about getting another quarterback in here that maybe has 1 or 2 years left of eligibility. And from that player standpoint, it's probably 1 year because you don't think you're going to stick around in Michigan for 2 years and expect to be the starter for both of them. But get a 1 year guy who will come in. And one of the thought that it could be was Maryland quarterback Billy Edwards Jr., who was supposed to be visiting Michigan on Monday. He's not visiting Michigan at all. I mean, the details are still a little bit sketchy on all of that, but that is the quarterback position. One thing you have to realize that when you get people in the portal, they're projects. Many of them are projects. Or they're proven players from sub-conference development.
Yep.
It is rolling of the dice. You're not generally going to see like a Seth McLaughlin who left Alabama as their starting center and going to Ohio State. That doesn't happen very often. Or Dylan Gabriel leaving Oklahoma to go to Oregon. Those are very few and far between. You kind of want somebody that it maybe got some all-conference recognition out of Power 4 to come in. But again, not too many are there. But Minnesota has jump-started. They've got 10 players already from the portal, including 4 running backs, if you can imagine that.
That's wild.
The Wolverines are down 4 linemen with playing experience. And then the news earlier this week, Greg, and I don't know if you've seen it or not, but Penn State's backup quarterback, Bo Prabula, is leaving Penn State, not participating in the playoffs. Now, he's not just their backup quarterback. He's part of the plays that happen in James Franklin's offense. You know about Tyler Warren, the tight end is lining up everywhere as a wide receiver, a tight end, a running back, a quarterback. He's everywhere. Bo Prabula is part of their special packages, trick play packages as well, and sometimes comes in goal line situations as opposed to Drew Aller when they want to run the ball. He is leaving.
Wow.
And
announcing that. And that's pretty wild.
So he's not going to be in the playoff. But why is he leaving? Why is he leaving now? Because Drew Aller announced that he's sticking around for 2025. And Bo
wants to get
Prabula,
the jump on it. Yeah.
Bo Prabula doesn't want to be the backup quarterback anymore.
Yeah.
So he wants to go somewhere else. Well, as other teams are starting to nail down who they want for their quarterback, he's got to leave the team now. And that's got James Franklin upset, and I understand it.
Yeah, no, I understand. But look, he's got to do what he's got to do. This is part of the argument. Michigan played in the playoff, played in the last game of the year, had fewer opportunities to grab guys as we've broken down. So he's kind of like acknowledging that that's part of the process. He needs to get his name out there to sign up for somebody. So we'll see.
So I have talked about also in the past about how Ohio State has managed to hang on to all of their top 5 rated quarterbacks over the years. Well, that is no more. Aaron Noland announcing earlier this week that he is leaving Ohio State. He was the number 5 quarterback in the class of 2024. Somebody that Ohio State got even higher rated than that at the last minute was Julian Sayin out of Alabama. Everybody at Alabama could leave the portal once Nick Saban decided to retire after the season was over. Ohio State picked up Julian Sayin, and they have the number 2 quarterback, because you know number 1 is Bryce Underwood. The number 2 quarterback, Tavian St. Clair, is at Ohio State. So Aaron Nolan and Devin Brown are leaving the Buckeyes seeing the handwriting on the wall. So even Ohio State can't keep all of their top 5 quarterbacks on the same roster. Everybody is kind of limited down to 1 or 2.
It's frustrating for these teams, but that's the world we live in, man. All right, let's head to halftime.
Hey, it's Nick Hopwood from Peak Wealth Management. Here's some Clell Mullins and some Gus Johnson for you.
You know, that's just bad for the sport, bad for college football. But at the end of the day, you know, some people gotta learn how to lose.
Do or die for Ohio State. Howard in trouble. Incomplete. Ohio State turns it over on downs. And the Michigan Wolverines will shock the college football world. Michigan will defeat Ohio State for the 4th consecutive time.
Hey, it's Nick Hopwood, CFP at Peak Wealth Management. Reach out to us at peakwm.com/mgoblog to learn more. At Peak, we have 25 years of planning and investing experience. We've been through the tough years in the market. 01, 08, 20, 22. And we've learned how to navigate these bear markets. We've learned how to help mitigate losses and limit the losses, unlike Ohio State, who continues to lose year after year and not learn from their mistakes. Every time they call a run play, it's a gift. Which victory was your favorite and why? Out of 21, 22, 23, or 24? Email me, nick at peakwm.com. We'll read your submission on our podcast episode this week. Search out Nick Hopwood to find the Trust the Plan podcast or youtube.com/peakwealthmgmt.
You know, that's just bad for the sport, bad for college football. But at the end of the day, you know, some people gotta learn how to lose.
So, Steve, our last episode, easily the top show since just after the aftermath of the national title way back in January. So, thank you, listeners. If you're new, rate us, review, share with your friends, and tell people about the Professor and the Pundit. It's how we grow. We're up followers, Steve, after a tough year, ending on a real nice note.
Just like the Michigan football team ending on a nice note in the regular season, beating Ohio State again. Thank you to the listeners, and always interested in hearing your feedback and your questions, and we'll try to answer them when we can on the next episode. At some point, we're going to have to transition from football to basketball. So are you ready for some basketball, Hank Williams style?
You know, if you asked me a few weeks ago, Steve, I would have said no. But you know what? I am ready for some basketball because there's a lot to like with this team.
Yeah, the men's team and the women's team. But let's talk about the men's team at first. The Wolverines among a cluster of teams that are tournament worthy so far. Taking a look at the net rankings that were established earlier this week, the Big Ten doesn't have anybody in the top 10, but they got 9 teams rated between 11 and 30, and Michigan is one of those teams. I believe the Wolverines are one of 3 teams in the 18-team Big Ten that is 2-0 in Big Ten play. And I got to tell you, if you've kind of turned Michigan basketball off because of last year, this year's Michigan basketball team has as many wins as last year's team. And if you want a buy-in factor, here's what got me. Win at the Kohl Center in Wisconsin. I'm in.
Yeah.
If you can do that, which they did, it is not something that has been easy to do. Even John Beilein had a tremendous amount of difficulty winning a basketball game at the Kohl Center. Dusty May does it in his first try. Okay, sold.
Yeah,
the
anyone
handshake.
will take that. Tom Izzo will take that.
I
Yeah.
am in.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with how hard these guys play. The effort, they're intense. They move the ball quickly. All of the action on the screens, really impressed. And they are guilty, Steve, of still stinging from last year's team. Obviously, basically a whole new set of guys. I'm really concerned about the turnovers, though, man. If you're watching these games, I'm really concerned. I think you can chalk that up to a group of people, including the coaches, who have never done it before together. I know Dusty brought some guys from FAU, but this is a whole new cast of characters. And the way they play, as hard as they play, you're going to have some balls flying around, and that's what we're seeing. But, man, I am pleasantly surprised. I do look forward to the next game. I definitely stopped watching, and it's good to be back, and I feel like the outlook is really bright for this team.
Area 51.
Yeah.
I love the creative mind of that. That is Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden's numbers, number 50 and number 1. And these two 7-footers, they're protecting the rim real well. I mean, Danny Wolf has been a real surprise about how he can.
Oh my God.
He could take the ball up court and he can shoot a 3. It's not like Hunter Dickinson. Oh, he shot a 3 and it went in. No, Danny Wolf could just shoot 3s.
No.
At 7 feet. And he can also take the ball to the cup as well. Even though the ball placement's a little high, seems like it could get stolen. He's taking in the lane and he's getting buckets that way too.
Well, I remember when we got him from Yale, and I was reading like some of the comments, and someone says, "Yeah, I watched a lot of Yale games this year. Good luck. This guy can't move his feet," or something like that in the comments. And I'm like, "Oh, great. This guy can move his feet, man. If you don't know what we're talking about, check this guy out." Yeah, he brings it up the court sometimes for a big guy. And then you got Golden. And together, they provide quite a problem for the opposing offenses. I checked today, Steve, when we're recording this, top 15 in KenPom in defensive efficiency. And when you play two 7-footers at the same time, you alter shots. You know, you people change their mind about whether they're going to cut, whether they're going to try to take it in on these guys. My one, nit against Golden is, man, does he miss a lot of shots for a big man right under the hoop. It almost seems unlucky, but he tosses the ball up there, or down because he's so big, and he just can't seem to finish when he's not dunking or he doesn't have a layup. I don't know if it's bad luck, Steve, or he's just got to tighten some things out. But this is going to be a tough team in the Big Ten, and winning those games like they did, Iowa and beating Wisconsin, off to a great start.
Despite losing big leads, they find a way to at least get back into the game too. I mean, was it frustrating watching the Iowa Hawkeyes and have a 16-point lead and their best player on the bench and then give up that 16-point lead and then be down by 5 or 6? I mean, a lot of teams would say goodnight. It's not our day. Michigan fought back and managed to win that game. And then against Arkansas, they were up big. They were trailing big. And then they had 6 or 7 opportunities to take the lead in the final minute. Didn't get any of them done.
No.
But there is a certain resiliency to the team that I like. You like their intensity. I like their resiliency when things don't go well.
Yeah, no, they're fun to watch. And speaking of fun to watch, I watched the ladies play Detroit Mercy. Okay, not a great team, but they hung 100 on them, Steve. And
what Ryan Days wanted to do for 6 years.
That's right. They straight up hung 100. And, boy, we've talked about the freshmen, Swords and Olsen. I'll add Tay Delphos. Mila Holloway is out there. She's fantastic. Macy Brown, another young player, a Miss Michigan, whatever they call it. They've got some great young talent. They're a player away, Steve, from a deep tournament run, and we may see a run this year. I have a feeling that there's going to be some people that are going to want to come play with these freshmen. They don't put them on Big Ten Network enough. They'll be on during the obviously during the Big Ten season. I think they have Ohio State on January 8th at Chrysler. That's going to be a huge game.
Ohio State's one of the top-ranked teams in women's college basketball, and there's a few of them. I mean, Michigan State's ranked up high as well. So,
yeah, and both teams ranked for the first time in a long time, both the women's and the men's, so that's really cool to see.
Meanwhile, Christmas is coming, and Greg, what are you getting me?
What am I getting you? If you want to get stuff for the Professor and the Pundit, obviously follow our podcast. We already told you that 100 times. Get us Oscars gift cards. We don't have to explain to our beautiful wives or families, where's the money going, because it's in a gift card. It's almost like a burner phone, right?
Right.
That's a great idea.
Yep.
Some of my favorite things, Steve, I like glassware. I like drinking out of things that kind of remind me of great things. And you can get these on Amazon. You used to get them on MDN, but they're the Perfect Season Michigan National Champion 15-0 rocks glasses that you can get. They're kind of fogged out, the lettering. They're on Amazon. They're fantastic. I'll put some of these links up on invictors.com, my favorite things. You know Art Volo, Steve.
Yes.
What radio's best friend, I believe, is
Yes.
Art. Well, Art has special permission to record and produce video from the games, and he overlays it with the U of M radio broadcast and syncs it up, basically.
Correct.
Is what he does. He's done this for years. He's had help from our friend Dr. Sapp, who's had all the old UFA recordings. But Art has a whole catalog of this stuff. He has Houston. He has the Rose Bowl. And he did the 13-10 Ohio State game. And I can share his email address. Art is offering those. He basically offers them at cost. He can't sell them for profit. But he did such a nice job, Steve, on the Ohio. He sent me like a 20-minute clip of the Ohio State game. It's really well done. I'll share his email in the show notes where you can email Art or go to his site, Volo Video, and I'll share the spelling of that. You can go to mgoblog.com and find these things, but they have a new shirt out, Steve. They had the Tips While Driving in Ohio shirt that we loved and we asked Seth about years ago, last year.
I'm wearing mine right now.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. It's got the plays from the game from a couple years ago. Well, they got a new one that basically lays out all the excuses for the last 4 years that Ohio has made about the game, and it's fantastic.
It's bigger than the Bible, though.
And they made it like almost like it's a board game with all the excuses. And then there's like cope cards, like where you can say you need to cope. It's really funny. It's really clever. And they have their yearbook out that chronicles the last 3 seasons with all their great writers and contributors, the victors. If you go to MGO blog, you can see that. No, we are not getting paid for any of this stuff. We are just sharing things that we love. Steve, by the way, I believe at home right now in a box somewhere, I went ahead and ordered a replica CFP trophy. I did. I had to. I needed one.
I get it.
We have all these trophies. I have jugs.
It.
I have Paul Bunyan. I have all these things. I finally went on Etsy, and there's different versions of them. I assume they're all computer printed and or painted or whatever. But I got one. I think it's about 20 inches high. Of course, the real one's bigger. I am excited. I don't know where I'm going to put it, whether it's going to go in my office at U of M or my office at home. You can get one with your team on it, but that's not what the trophy looks like, right? So it'd be like, well, am I going to get a Little Brown Jug replica? Or are you going to put Michigan on both sides? No, I want Minnesota. I want what it looks like.
Right.
So I want the CFP trophy replica like a replica trophy.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't hand Jim Harbaugh one with the block M on it. So, but you can get that if that's what you want.
I keep thinking about this board game idea about Ohio State excuses on Michigan. It could be, like if you land on a space, instead of community chest, it could be coaching change.
Yeah.
And if you land on chance, it's called cope. There might not be like land space or roads around Ohio State's campus, but there's something that just percolating about all the different excuses and landing on spots, chutes and ladders.
Yeah. Well, maybe like there's a square for like boardwalk, which is effectively winning the game, and you have the option to plant the flag and then decide whether you get a penalty or not, namely a felony.
Well, yes. Future felonies. You know about this. The story is over a week old now. We're not going to rehash, but I would like to discuss possible future felonies in Ohio.
Yeah, sure. Let's
start brainstorming about future possible felonies. If you plant a flag in Ohio, it may turn into a 5th-degree felony. What about singing the victors too loudly in the locker room? Could that also incite a riot by Ohio State's players who have no coping mechanisms or no self-control?
Arguably, yes, Steve, it could.
Singing the victors too loudly. Jake Butt, I learned, they said Jim Harbaugh liked having the doors open in the locker room when they sing the victors so the other team could hear it.
I didn't hear that. That's pretty...
Yes, apparently that is something that Michigan does. They open the doors so that it all could be heard. How about this? How about wearing blue at Ohio Stadium? Could that be a felony?
It could be. Having a license plate that has like a maize and blue Michigan like emblem or Rose Bowl or something, around it could be a problem.
It has incited other felonies. Just because wearing blue at Ohio Stadium, when somebody from a drunk crowd of Ohio State decides to wail off on a Michigan fan because they're wearing blue, they're inciting a felony. And it's not the Ohio State person's fault. It's usually the Michigan player's fault for showing up.
Sure.
That's a 5th-degree felony.
Yes. Wearing an outrageous Wolverine hat a too big a block M hat that's a little annoying, like super fan, like wearing the outfit, like wearing a costume.
Yeah.
The Marvel character Wolverine, over the line.
Right.
Felony.
Let's cap this off. One more. You want to read the last one?
What's the last one?
Losing to Michigan for a 5th year in a row. I'll read it.
Right.
Losing to Michigan for a 5th year in a row should be a felony in the state of Ohio.
Well, they might arrest their coach if he loses to Michigan a 5th year in a row. So, yeah,
frisk him.
It might be
put on the cuffs.
It might be on the eastern sideline. There would be some arrests by Ohio people if they're down there. It's funny with all this ridiculous talk. I haven't heard anyone investigate pepper spraying players, and I don't think we're going to. And that's really what we should be looking at, Steve. We're going to get serious here for a minute, but really, what a bunch of losers. And I did hear, who's the guy on Pat McAfee, the Buckeye? Yeah, A.J. Hawk say these are not serious people about this felony thing, which, thank goodness.
He actually said something?
He did. I heard him say, I'm paraphrasing, but this isn't a serious thing.
I've never seen...
Yeah, he kind of just sits there, doesn't he?
Never seen him say anything.
It's hard to get a word in on Pat.
They put the camera on him, and he just sits there and stares at the camera looking like the Terminator.
Speaking of Pat McAfee, he was on Prem, Steve, at West Virginia. They did the show from some auditorium where they announced Rich Rod returning to the Mountaineers. His glorious return back to not where he was born. He was born in Chicago, despite what Wikipedia says. He grew up in Granttown, West Virginia. This is not far from where Fielding Yost grew up. Mm-hmm. And he played football at West Virginia, and of course, came directly, left his fine program there to come to Michigan. Had a public. It was kind of clunky because McAfee tried to introduce him. The lights went down, but it wasn't synced up. But they did it live on ESPN. And it didn't start out so good for Rich Rod.
No, I mean, I don't know who does a press conference for the public to attend, but now I understand it was McAfee trying to get everybody excited. But Rich Rod got a heckler right out from the very beginning, and he wasn't in the upper row of the rafter there. He was right at concourse level, telling Rich Rod what he thought.
I heard he said, go back to Michigan. Yeah, I heard this, that he said, go back to Michigan. Like, you left us before, beat it. So, wow. Yeah.
Some people can't forget, and some people can't forgive.
Yeah, well, no thanks on Rich Rod. Look, and again, this is one of those things. We've talked about it. Like, boy, he's had a rocky trip. Kind of awkward.
It got worse at Arizona. A lot of purgatory for Rich Rodriguez.
But he's not the only big name to get hired recently. You couldn't miss this if you watch ESPN. Boy, they loved this. Bill Belichick, North Carolina. What do you think, Steve?
He can be a head coach, and the way that NIL is at, and he's going to be like a general manager, and he can hire people within the NFL. Michigan's hiring people that has experience in the NFL. Have your coordinators run the show. I'll take care of everything else from an ancillary matter, and I can build a roster and coach a team on game day. And the way the contract is set out, there is a $10 million buyout for the summer. But after he starts coaching a game at North Carolina, his buyout drops, from $10 million to $1 million?
Yeah,
in case the NFL is calling?
So it does seem kind of like Saban's been on this charm offensive, and probably just for his reputation and character with the funny commercials, Steve. And they are funny, and he's kind of been the dry humor guy and the sage on ESPN Game Day with to offset McAfee. Belichick's kind of been that, going on McAfee and kind of cutting it up. He's got the super young girlfriend, a few funny.
So he can recruit.
Well, he sure can. Some funny Instagram stuff, right? He's kind of doing a little bit of a charm offensive, and going back to college. I kind of buy, though, the prevailing wisdom that, look, this might be a temporary thing at UNC. Do it for a little bit, and then it's really his goal is to get back to the NFL. So we'll see.
So at 72, it's hard to say you're coaching for the long term. But one of the things to look at, if Washington defensive coordinator Steve Belichick immediately goes to North Carolina, he's not leaving Washington and Jed Fish to do a one-year gig with his dad.
Okay. But maybe he's
if he does, it's a longer term. It's going to be a longer term thing.
All right. Do we have time for things only we care about, Steve?
Please.
Yes. Play the music.
Nobody cares.
Everybody knows nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares!
I care.
This is kind of weird, and again, qualifies things that maybe I only care about. But Cole Cabana is one of the Michigan running backs that is opting out and transferring, and he's landed at Minnesota under PJ Fleck. Talked to you earlier about how Minnesota has already got 10 players in from the portal. 4 of them are running backs. Cole Cabana is one of those. And what's really interesting is that the 2 top backs in the state of Michigan during that particular recruiting class was Cole Cabana and Minnesota's current star running back, Darius Taylor. Both Darius Taylor and Cole Cabana wanted to play for Michigan. Michigan made Cole Cabana a priority, and Cole Cabana has barely played. Meanwhile, Darius Taylor seems to get over 150 yards rushing no matter what game he plays. Cole Cabana leaves Michigan, and of all places that he chooses to go to is Minnesota, which, again, already has Darius Taylor and recruited like an all-conference player from the Sun Belt Conference. So there's going to be a lot of competition there. I don't exactly understand it, but the ironic thing is you've got 2 players within a half hour's driving distance of Michigan Stadium, both wanting to play at Michigan, and really neither did.
Neither worked out.
And both of them are now playing for PJ Fleck.
It is wild. Now, I think a lot of people care about Cole Cabana leaving. I don't know if they care about what you've put together here, Steve, with the 2 4-star running backs ending up at Minnesota. But a lot of people care because Cole Cabana was kind of the golden recruit. He was nowhere close to Bryce Underwood, don't get me wrong, but his name in this area, in this county, he's from Dexter, Michigan, right up the road. Like, he played against all the local teams. So he was kind of the guy. I can tell you this, Steve. Cole Cabana knows his jug history.
Well, that's
I happen
important
to know that very well because he was may or may not have been a student athlete in my history college athletics class. And fine young man. And I wish him the best. I hope to see him play. I was hoping to see what he could do this year with the Wolverines. But, hey, this is the world we live in, man.
It is. So here we are with another show. We thank you again for listening to us. Please rate and review and tell other people about the Professor and the Pundit podcast as well. But for right now, despite 5 losses, Michigan has won every rivalry game. Nothing has moved out of the trophy case, right yet, Greg?
Not a single thing. In fact, I just added the CFP trophy to mine. So I practically have the trophy case now at home.
So I still feel like Michigan football are still the reigning national champions. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue.